UFC is putting on their annual Noche UFC card, and this one turned out to be a bit of a dumpster fire. Last year, the Noche UFC card was at the Sphere, one of the best venues that you could ever dream of, and they were hoping to do a big card down in Mexico, big pay-per-view. They couldn't get the arena built in time, so they had to move it to San Antonio. It will be a fight night headlined by none other than Diego Lopes and Lord Jean Silva. Lopes looking to bounce back after the title shot loss to Volkanovski earlier this year, and Lord Jean Silva looking to continue the momentum after his submission win over Bryce Mitchell. It's a big fight in the featherweight division. The card overall is not terrible. When you look at the matchups, I do think they are going to be some exciting fights, but the name value is definitely not there when you're looking at the main card overall. I like the main event, but after that, it kind of drops off a good amount when you're talking about name value. It is a fight night, though. It is free, so I got to give him some leeway there. I'm going to go through all the fights. This is before all the tape study goes in. I'm basically just giving you my early leans, my early thoughts on every single one of these matchups based on what we know. We do have some newcomers as well. I had to watch some tape on them, and I will tell you right now, I think these newcomers are coming to put on some fun fights. After watching the tape, I was pretty impressed just as far as the overall aggressiveness, the entertainment value that I think we're going to get when we're watching these fights. I think they're going to be pretty good. So let's hop into what would normally be the recap, but I can't do that because I'm filming this before UFC Paris. I got to get out of town for the weekend, so I'm filming this on a Thursday night. So I don't know what happened at UFC Paris. Hopefully it was good. Hopefully the card was good. Hopefully we made some money because we've been making money steadily over the past month or so. We've been cashing out big time, and hopefully Paris is another one of those. We're positive 65.81 units on the year. Hopefully that increases after UFC Paris. If you want all the bets, jump in the 105 Picks premium membership, link down in the description below. But since we don't got to recap that means we got more time for some fights. Let's hop into it right away with the Ultimate Fighter finale in the welterweight division. This was supposed to happen at UFC 319 in Chicago, and Rodrigo Sezinando, I believe, had to pull out. I don't know if it was visa issues or if it was an injury, but he had to pull out, and they had just rebooked it a few weeks later for Noche UFC. So I'm not mad about it. I think this is going to be a good fight, man. I think Rodrigo Sezinando is going to have a good advantage on the ground here, but he's got to get it there. And I think Donchenko, he was my pick when I was breaking down this fight the first time, and I'm going to stick with it. You know, from what I saw from Donchenko, he's a very young guy. He's a training partner of Rafael Fiziev, so he's a very good striker. Ukrainian guy, trains at Tiger Muay Thai, and I think this guy has some real power in his hands, on the feet, I should say. He's very good at imposing his will. I think he's very physical. I think his ground game is solid as well. I don't think he's going to be a fish out of water on the ground, but I do think if the fight hits the ground, I think Sezinando's jiu-jitsu is going to be a bit better, than Donchenko's, who's mostly a striker. So if the fight hits the ground, Sezinando probably going to have, I don't want to say have his way, but have the advantage on the feet, though. I think Donchenko is going to be able to hit up Sezinando pretty well. And I think Donchenko is going to be able to get this one done. Not a very long breakdown with this one because, in all reality, we've kind of broken it down before, and I don't really want to just sit here and blab on about a fight that we've talked about before. So, overall, I think Donchenko gets this one done. I'm going to take him for the early pick. And, of course, with the pullout of Sezinando, it's not really a good thing to have. And this fight isn't really that much farther away from when it was supposed to be originally gone down. So I think Donchenko gets it done. He'll be my early pick. Let's move on to some new matchups. Alice Pereira, the 19-year-old prospect, comes in as a minus 220 favorite, taking on Montserrat Rendon. And obviously, the one thing that jumps off the board here, if you look at the tape, is Pereira's 19 and Rendon is 36. So Pereira could legitimately be her daughter. And that is a huge, huge age difference. This Alice Pereira girl, she's 6-0. I don't think she's fought very good competition, but she's 19 and she's done exactly what she needed to do, finishing most of her fights except for one. And on the feet, she's going to be super, super aggressive. She's a pretty built 19-year-old. Like, she is, I don't want to say more physical than Rendon, because Rendon's a pretty physical girl. I don't really think she has a ton of skills, but she is strong and she is willing to be in the clinch and bully girls there. But I don't think Alice Pereira is going to be outmatched in that way. I think Pereira is going to have a huge speed advantage here against Rendon. And Rendon just doesn't really have much on the feet. I think she's got to get the fight to the ground, which could happen. I think, Pereira's ground game is generally untested. She's been fighting really low level of competition. A couple of her bouts have been flagged on Tapology for illegitimate matchmaking, basically saying the girls that she's fighting, like there's just literally no chance that the girl that she's fighting has any way to win the fight. Basically just giving her a layup, which you could say that about a lot of fights and a lot of these regional fighters. But when they're flagged by Tapology, that means it's really, really bad. So level of competition for Pereira doesn't look great, but I don't really think Rendon is anything good. She does have a UFC win, though. And, even though it was to Tamires Vidal, like, I can't really rate that win either. So I don't really think Tamires Vidal is UFC level either. I'm just going to take the younger girl here. It's clear that they want her to win, man. She's 19 years old, and this is a 36-year-old Rendon that I don't even really think the UFC had much of an interest in signing to begin with. I think they were just trying to fill a spot on an Apex card, and they gave her a contract. So give me Alice Pereira for the early pick here. I'm not sure that I would lay the juice on her, though. Minus 220 on a UFC debut at 19 years old, fighting that level of competition is pretty testy, but I do think she probably gets this one done. Give me Pereira. Moving on to some flyweights, we got Luis Gurule coming off the loss to O'Day Osborne in his UFC debut, coming in as a minus 185 favorite against Jesus Aguilar. Aguilar, I think, has kind of high-rolled his UFC career, because when this guy came into the UFC, I didn't think he was going to be much. I didn't even know that he was going to stick around for more than 3 fights. I thought he'd probably come into the UFC, lose a couple fights, and then get cut. But lucky for him, he's Mexican. And UFC has Noche UFC every year, and they're going to need some more Mexicans, especially, when there's not many good Mexicans on the UFC roster. And, timing-wise and all that, they kind of need some Mexicans on the roster, even if they're not that great. And the flyweight division isn't that deep either. So, Jesus Aguilar has a spot in the UFC. I don't think he's terrible. He got 3 UFC wins, so I can't really knock on him too much there. But on the feet, the guy just doesn't really throw. He's not very technical on the feet. I think he just throws with power, hoping to knock you out with something. His only knockout in his career is against Shannon Ross. It was very early on, and he hit him with a clean shot, and I bet on him there, and I did not think he was going to knock him out, but he did. And then on the ground, he's got a nasty guillotine. This guy is literally like an overhand right and a guillotine. Outside of that, I guess maybe some grappling. He's got decent takedowns if he wants to go to him, but I just don't really think it's going to work out here against Luis Gurule. Because Gurule, when he came into the UFC, this guy was 10-0. He had beaten some good level of competition on the regional scene, and they gave him O'Day Osborne, and he was a big favorite against O'Day. But, O'Day is a seasoned veteran who's very explosive, very long, hits hard, very fast, and Gurule did pretty well in round 1, and then round 2, he got caught. So, I think this is a good bounce-back spot for Gurule to go in there against a guy that I don't think has very good striking. I don't really think he has some amazing wrestling or grappling game. He does have some dangerous submissions, but if Gurule can stay out of those dangerous spots, I think he can beat him up on the feet. I think he can get a victory. So I'm going to take Luis Gurule for the early pick here. I think it's a good bounce-back spot for him to get a W. Moving on, we got Alden Coria coming in as a plus 285 underdog against Alessandro Costa, sitting at minus 350. This one was one of the guys that I watched who's a newcomer, and I think this guy's going to be fun. This guy, Coria, is going to be real fun. He is a training partner of Joshua Van in Houston, 4-ounce fight club. And you watching him fight, you could see the similarities to how they fight. Very boxing heavy, throws really sharp combinations, very powerful, and they're kind of in your face. They're willing to just stand in front of you, and they want to box. Takedown defense is pretty solid. Get-ups are pretty good. There wasn't a ton on film of him, getting taken down and held on the ground for long periods of time. He does have a submission loss, but these guys, like Joshua Van, they fight in Fury FC pretty regularly, so they're getting some good cage time. I don't think he's been a professional for all that long, and I think Alden Correa is going to be giving some guys problems. I was very shocked to see him as a big underdog here to Alessandro Costa, and I've been a believer on Alessandro Costa. I think the guy is a very solid flyweight. Like, he is built for the weight class, very strong. He's got solid leg kicks, pretty solid boxing. He's got power in his hands. I think his jiu-jitsu is pretty good as well. Like, he's a pretty good overall fighter. But at this price tag, I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I think Costa can be hit on the feet. I also think Correa can be hit on the feet. I don't want to just, glance over that. Like, I've seen Correa hurt on film as well on the regional scene, but in most cases, he's been able to bounce back or battle back in the fight and either get his hand raised or make it to the final bell. So Correa is not immune to getting hit on the feet by any means. You know, he's going to stand in the pocket with you, and he's going to be willing to exchange. And if you're willing to exchange like that, you're going to get cracked with some shots. I think Correa's boxing is better than Costa's, but if Costa can mix in some grappling, can stay at range, can rip some leg kicks, I can see how he wins here, but I don't really see why he's minus 350. It just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, Correa, I think, is young and improving, and I think he's been very active as well. I can't really say the same for Costa. I wish he was more active because I think he's good. You know, he went to a competitive decision with Steve Erceg. He ran through Kevin Borjas, ran through Jimmy Flick. His UFC debut against Albazi, he was kind of getting brought in to lose against Albazi in that one. UFC debut, get it out of the way. He's a training partner of Diego Lopes as well, so it's not like he's out in some part of Brazil or Mexico and not getting good training. He's getting good training every single day. And I think there could be some improvements for Costa, but this line is a little bit wide for my liking. So I'm going to lean towards the underdog here at plus 285 on Alden Correa to come in here, make it competitive, and we'll see how it looks. But give me Correa for the early pick, just considering where the line is at. Moving on to the middleweights, we got Zach Reese taking on Cedriques Dumas, SD. He's back. He's out of the dog crate. He's got the ankle monitor off, or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's still got it on, and we'll see how that looks. But I'm assuming they got the ankle monitor off, and he is back in action looking to get some money from the UFC. They're giving him Zach Reese. I mean, this is just completely wild to me that you would throw it on a Noche UFC card. I mean, you got SD Dumas and you got Zach Reese in a Noche UFC card, but you got to look at where it's actually happening in San Antonio, Texas, and that's why I believe Zach Reese is on the card. He's a Texas guy from a very small town, so they bring him on here. They give him SD Dumas. Zach Reese is a guy that he's going to go in there and he's going to be kill or be killed. And I think Zach Reese is going to be able to kill here against Cedriques Dumas, because the one thing with Dumas is if things go bad for him, he usually finds a way out. You know, look at all of his losses against Ola Shaychek, against Nursultan Rizaboyev, against Joshua Fremd. As soon as that adversity hits, this dude is ready to take the door out. And I think Zach Reese is probably going to give him that adversity early on, and I think he's probably going to get an early finish. But I do have to say, Zach Reese is at times a glass cannon. Like, I can't really trust this guy to go in there and be tactical, because he's very hittable on the feet, kind of fights with his chin up, a little bit looping. He's willing to take bottom position as well because he's going to look for subs off his back. So Zach Reese isn't exactly some trustworthy guy, even against Cedriques Dumas, but I do think he's going to win the fight. So I'm going to take Zach Reese for the early pick here. I think I've just never been a believer in Cedriques Dumas, and his UFC wins are not really much to hang your hat on. So give me Zach Reese for the early pick. Some strawweights here. We got Tatiana Suarez coming off the loss, her first career loss to Zhang Wei Li in a fight that was very sad for me to watch, because I've been a believer in Tatiana Suarez, and I've been a truther of Tatiana Suarez. And in that fight against Zhang Wei Li, I know how good Wei Li is, but I also thought Tatiana Suarez looked, I don't want to say past her prime, but way past her prime, or just pretty washed, man. Like, she looked like the injuries had stacked up to the point of no return, essentially. So from now on in her career, it's going to be tough for me to really have confidence in her, especially at a big price tag at minus 410. Amanda Lemos, on the other hand, I don't think she's the older fighter here, but I would actually argue that she's more in her prime. And, you know, her flaws in her game have always been her takedown defense, her ground game, because on the feet, she's extremely fast. She hits very hard. But against certain fighters, she's showed decent level of takedown defense. And, you know, last fight against Lucindo, she was the underdog. She won that one by stuffing the takedowns and actually out-grappling Yasmin Lucindo. But when I was watching tape on that one, Lucindo is more of a body lock takedown type of girl, and Lemos is very strong in those positions. Tatiana Suarez will go to the body lock, but she's also she's good at wrestling the legs with the double legs and the single legs. So I think if Tatiana Suarez is going to wrestle the legs here, I think she can get her down, and Tatiana Suarez is a very good grappler once the fight hits the ground. So I do understand why Tatiana Suarez is the favorite here, but I do have my concerns just as far as how she is with her body. You know, like how is her body feeling? I don't know if those injuries are just going to get worse because it looked really bad against Weili. Obviously, Weili and Lemos is completely different stratosphere, but I do think Lemos could be alive here as an underdog. If the fight plays out on the feet, Lemos is going to piece her up. I'm going to lean towards Tatiana Suarez getting those takedowns and winning the fight, but I'm minus 410. I'm not interested at all. And if anything, I'm interested in the underdog at plus 340. So give me Tatiana Suarez for the early pick, but I think the line is pretty dang wide, and I would not be looking to get involved there. Joaquim Silva taking on Claudio Puelles. Puelles comes in at plus 120 against Silva minus 140. I mean, I didn't think Claudio Puelles was ever going to fight in the UFC again. I mean, this guy fights like once a year. And every time I watch him, I'm disappointed almost every time because it's just not really a fight. This dude is the definition of a jiu-jitsu nerd. He's like the Paul Craig of the lightweight division. But it might even be worse because he doesn't get knocked out as easily. He doesn't have the wins that Paul Craig has. And he's not even like a Ryan Hall. He's not even like rolling for leg locks and serviceable on top. Like Claudio Puelles is a legit jiu-jitsu nerd that I don't even know how he has 5 UFC wins. But you do have to say he's a very good grappler. And Joaquim Silva, in his Instagram bio or Instagram name, I think it's Neto BJJ, and everyone has always talked about this guy's BJJ, but he never uses it. He just goes in there and chucks hands. And if there's ever a fight where he should not use his BJJ, it's probably this one. You know, if Joaquim Silva comes in here, keeps the fight on the feet, he should absolutely beat Claudio Puelles. Puelles, though, he's probably a better wrestler than like Paul Craig. Like, he's not a terrible wrestler. It's just these guys know that if they keep their distance, they stuff the wrestling, they can beat him. And if you have nothing to offer on the feet, it's easier to stuff those takedowns. And if Joaquim Silva has any idea of how this fight should play out, he should just keep it on the feet. So I'm going to take Joaquim Silva. I think he's the way better striker in this one. And I think if the fight's going to start on the feet, he should be able to keep it on the feet. And I think he should be able to get it done. I'm going to take Joaquim Silva here. He is the much older fighter and the smaller fighter, which does make me a little bit, timid on the pick, but I do think he's just way easier path to victory. I don't really think Puelles has much to offer on the feet, and I think Joaquim Silva does hit pretty dang hard. So give me Silva for the early pick. Now we got some middleweights. We got Dusko Todorovic taking on Jose Medina. They brought him back. This is his third UFC fight. I'm not sure if it's the last one on his UFC contract, but I don't want to say I hope so because I kind of hope they keep him so I can keep fading him. Jose Medina should have never been in the UFC. He's plus 250 here to Dusko Todorovic. And, if there was anybody that I could match Dusko up with to where he's minus 300, it would probably be Medina. Medina doesn't offer anything outside of toughness. He doesn't offer anything. His striking is slow, doesn't have power in his hands. His takedowns aren't that great. His overall jiu-jitsu, I don't think is all that great. He's just very tough. He's very gritty. He could maybe be improving. He was a guy, I think he's from Bolivia. He fought in the Contender Series. He got beat to shreds for 3 rounds. Dana gave him a contract for God knows what. And they put him in the room with some good guys, and they were hoping he would improve with that toughness, and I just haven't really seen it. So Dusko, even at his current form, 3-6 in the UFC, not the best chin, but I do think he's like way better. He's just way better than Dusko, or he's way better than Jose Medina. So I'm going to take Dusko here. Minus 300 is a disgusting line to ever play Dusko at in a UFC fight, but I do think he's just way better than Jose Medina. So give me Dusko for the early pick here. I can never pick Jose Medina in a UFC fight, even if it is Dusko Todorovic. Give me Dusko. Before I get into the main card, I want to remind you, if you want all the bets, jump on the Normal Fight Picks Premium membership, link down in the description below. We're positive 65.81 units in 2025, and we are climbing that up. Use code HeyJive for a 5-day free trial, link down in the description below. We've been absolutely crushing it. Over the last 7 events, we're positive 22.58 units. We're on a hot streak, boys. Hopefully that continues. If you need a sports book, hop on Wager Attack. It's available in all 50 states. You get a 200% free play bonus if you deposit. If you deposit with crypto, you get a 10% cash bonus as well. So you deposit $100, you're going to get $200 in free play. And if you deposit that $100 in crypto, you're going to get $10 added to your cash bonus. There's a link down in the description below. Use code HeyJive to unlock that free play bonus. Let's go on to the main card. I'm not really sure if this fight is happening, but I believe it is happening. I believe it's agreed upon. We don't have betting odds on it yet, but it's Alexander Hernandez taking on Diego Ferreira. Diego Ferreira was supposed to fight at UFC 319 against Bobby Green, and Bobby Green had to pull out, so I would understand why they want to turn him around here at Noche UFC. And Hernandez had a knockout victory against Chase Hooper in a fight that he didn't really take any damage, so he steps in to take on Diego. It's a good matchup. I think it's a very fun matchup at that. Hernandez was an underdog to Chase Hooper, and I was warning people on Chase Hooper. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like Chase Hooper is beating these old guys, and Hernandez, not old, but he's a pretty good athlete. And look what happened. I wish I would have bet it, but I didn't have the balls. This is a different matchup, though. Diego Ferreira isn't just a grappler. He does have a good striking game as well. And you look at how Diego's losing, it's usually guys that are grappling him up. Mateusz Gamrot, Beneil Dariush, like Gregor Gillespie. These are the guys that are beating Diego Ferreira. And even at 40 years of age, I think he's got a very serviceable game to pull off a victory here against Hernandez. I'm actually trying to figure out where this line is going to be. After the knockout win against Hooper, I think Hernandez might be a slight favorite here with the age difference as well. I think Hernandez might be a slight favorite here, maybe minus 140, minus 150, but I don't really expect the line to be too wide on either side. I think it's going to be a competitive fight. I think Hernandez is going to be a bit faster. I think Hernandez's takedown defense has looked pretty dang good, especially as of recently. I actually think he's looked pretty dang good, like since he's moved up to 155. I think he's looked really good, and I think since he left Factory X and he's been training mostly with like Brandon Royval and they got like a crew there, I think he actually looks like way more dialed in. Maybe it's just the maturity from Alexander Hernandez, or maybe it's just the competition. Who knows? But I do think he could come in here, outstrike Diego Ferreira, defend the takedowns from Diego Ferreira, and I think he could win the fight. So I'm going to lean towards the younger guy here in Alexander Hernandez. I do think he's probably going to be a slight favorite against Diego as well. We'll see where those odds come out, but I feel like I've been pretty sharp on where these lines are going to come out. I'm going to think Alexander Hernandez is going to be minus 140, minus 150 in that range. Could be a little bit higher, but I do think they'll give some respect to Diego Ferreira, who had a great fight against Mateusz Rambetsky, and they're not going to overlook that, I can tell you that. But the age difference, I think, is going to be a big deal. So give me Alexander Hernandez for the early pick. Let's move on. We got some bantamweights here. We got Santiago Luna taking on Quang Le. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to be on the main card, but if it is on the main card, that should tell you a lot, because Santiago Luna is making his UFC debut. He's plus 165, taking on the 1-2 in the UFC, Quang Le. Quang Le is 33. He's 1-2 in the UFC. He just got his first win in the UFC against Gastelum Bolanos. I don't know how much the UFC really cares about Quang Le, but when you're looking at Santiago Luna, Mexican guy, they're bringing him in for the Noche UFC card, and he's got 6 finishes in 6 wins, and I think most of them come in the first or the second round. Very exciting fighter. When I was watching his tape, there's not really a boring fight of any part of his fights. Now, he's a guy that trains at Entrom Gym, which is in Tijuana, I believe, and it's a gym that is pretty respected in Mexico. So I think he's got some good training going on. I don't think the level of competition is all that amazing, but I do think the guy has some skills, and he's going to put on fun fights. I think they want to put him on this main card because it's going to be a fun fight. It's a new Mexican prospect. Maybe he has some Mexican fans and all that, and I think they're setting him up for a guy that I don't think they really care for. So, I mean, if Luna wins against Quang Le, they're in a good spot. Now, all that is just kind of, where do I think the UFC is going with this matchup? When I look at it stylistically, Santiago Luna is a very aggressive striker who is there to be hit, but he has a good chin. He showed pretty dang good durability, and he hits hard. And he is a very good grappler as well. Very aggressive grappler, going to hunt the submissions when the fight is on the ground, good back takes, stuff like that. Quang Le, he's a solid grappler. He has some power. He's lives in Minnesota, I believe. He's fighting these guys on the Minnesota regional scene that I just don't really think were good. And then once he got to the UFC, short notice fight against Gutierrez, didn't really do much in that fight outside of round 2. I think he had the back or something like that. I think he won a round, but got outstruck pretty easily. Then he got knocked out against Long Zhao in Macau, China. And then he beat Gaston Bolanos as a slight dog in a fight that he uses grappling against Bolanos, who's just not a very good grappler. So how does he beat Santiago Luna? I mean, he could catch him on the feet. Maybe he could club and sub him. I just don't really think Luna's going to give him a clean fight, and I think Luna's the younger guy who's a little bit more dangerous than Quang Le. So I'm going to side towards the UFC newcomer in Santiago Luna to come in here and make his UFC debut and get a dub against Quang Le. So I think it's a setup fight for the younger guy who's 21, still improving, Mexican, comes in here on Noche UFC and cashes as a dog. I'm going to lean towards Santiago Luna, but I'll go back and watch some Quang Le film, and maybe something will change my mind. But at the current odds, I think it's Luna or pass. Moving on, we got Kelvin Gastelum coming in at -230 against Dustin Stoltzfus. I was looking at a picture of Kelvin Gastelum and Henry Cejudo, and Henry Cejudo looked like he was eating some triple cheeseburgers, man. Kelvin Gastelum was in that picture as well, and he actually looked in a lot better shape than I'm kind of used to. I mean, you look at him on the screen, man, he looks like an absolute brick. And he looked a little bit slimmer in the picture. We'll see if he actually makes weight. He should be able to make 185, but who knows with Kelvin Gastelum? You never really know. Never been a fan of Kelvin Gastelum. Never really thought he was all that great. He's just very, very tough. And Joe Pyfer, I don't know. If Joe Pyfer hit anybody else with those shots, like, they're probably going down. He hit Kelvin Gastelum with some big shots, and Kelvin just ate him, made it to a decision, lost the decision. Kelvin Gastelum's just undersized for 185, but he's taking on Stoltzfus, who's 3-6 in the UFC. This is a massive, massive step down in competition to where he's used to. And the last time this happened was against Daniel Rodriguez, and there was all that stuff with the weight miss and them moving weight classes and stuff that kind of screwed Daniel Rodriguez away from a fair fight. But either way, Kelvin Gastelum won that fight, and that was a step down in competition, and we saw how that went. He won the fight fairly cleanly. Stoltzfus, I think he's kind of improving. I don't really think he's a guy that's just kind of mailed it in. Like, he's never had a ton of success in the UFC, but he's been competitive in a good amount of fights. He's serviceable on the feet, pretty good wrestler, good ground game. It's just he doesn't really have like a complete skill set to win a lot of fights. He doesn't have a lot of finishing upside outside of a Marc-Andre Barrios bonk, like something weird like that, but you ain't going to do that to Kelvin. Over the course of 15 minutes, I think Kelvin's just going to be able to outbox him, going to be able to stuff the takedowns, and I think he's going to be able to win the fight. Kelvin Gastelum's -230. I expected him to be a favorite here against Stoltzfus, who's usually the underdog and usually a pretty sizable one at that. Stoltzfus is not an easy guy to finish, though. I think this could be a Kelvin Gastelum decision. Stoltzfus is fairly durable. You look at the way he's getting knocked out, like Bruno Ferreira double spinning back elbows, Abus Magomedov front kick to the face. Like, you got to really clip this guy to put him out. So he's tough. He'll be there for 15 minutes, but, Kelvin's cardio has never really been a bad point of his fighting career. So I'll take Kelvin here for the early pick. I think it's a huge step down in competition. They put him on the Noche UFC card for a reason. They matched him up with Stoltzfus for a reason. I think he should get a W here. Give me Kelvin Gastelum for the early pick. Now we got the featured bout of the night. We got Jared Gordon coming in here against Rafa Garcia. Garcia sits at +205. Jared Gordon -240. Jared Gordon coming off the big knockout victory at the Apex. I was there in attendance, and before the fight, I actually chucked a little bit on Jared Gordon to get a knockout at +900. I was like, this number's got to be wrong. And he cashed it for me. Round one, knocks out Thiago Moises, and Jared Gordon is sneakily on a legit, I don't want to say streak, but you look at the recent, 8 to 10 fights in his UFC career, he's won most of them, man. He's won most of them, but he is 37, and, Rafa Garcia has never really jumped off the board to me as some amazing fighter, but he is serviceable, man. He's a solid striker, good wrestler, and he's very tough. He's had one knockout in his career, and his only knockout loss was a ground and pound TKO from Grant Dawson, where Grant Dawson just out-grappled him and beat the piss out of him. But Garcia is a good grappler, good wrestler on the feet. I think he's a little bit, I don't want to say outmatched against some of these guys, but he just doesn't have like the pop to get much respect. But his overall striking is pretty good. Jared Gordon, I think, is going to be throwing a lot of volume here. I don't think he's really going to try to wrestle Rafa. If anything, Rafa's probably going to try to wrestle him, but I don't think he's going to have a lot of success with it. I think Jared Gordon is the deserved favorite here, but I do think Jared Gordon as a favorite price tag on minus 240 is not really something that we've been seeing very often. And I don't think Rafa Garcia is a pushover. So I think it could be a competitive fight. I think it could go to a decision. And I think at that point, it's up to the judges. But I do think Jared Gordon is probably going to be able to land the better shots here and get his hand raised. So I'm going to lean towards Jared Gordon to get this one done for the early pick. But he's the older guy. Got a lot more UFC experience. But I just don't think Garcia is like a pushover. You got to be on your P's and Q's against Rafa Garcia. Because if you're not ready for that 15 minutes, like Garcia's got good cardio, good striking, good wrestling. You got to be able to have all those in your bag. I think Jared Gordon has them in his bag. What I'm trying to say is I think this could be a close fight when it comes down to it. I'll take Jared Gordon for the early pick, though. Co-main event. Stepping in on short notice is going to be David Martinez. He fills in for Raul Rosas Jr. Jr. had to pull out, and Rob Font is likely going from a big underdog to, I want to say big underdog, but an underdog, to a favorite against David Martinez. Martinez, one UFC fight. And it was against a very low-level opponent, to be honest. A very, very low-level opponent in a fight that they kind of set him up for in Mexico as well. Now he's stepping on short notice. A big opportunity for him, though, against a guy that has 19 UFC fights and has been, in the top 15 of the bantamweight division for quite some time. Rob Font, I got to say, I don't think he's washed. I don't think he's washed, but I do think his durability is going down. I do think his grappling has definitely showed a lot of flaws over the years. It has kind of improved a little bit, but I think that's just because the level of competition has gone down a bit, and I think he's able to take advantage of that by getting back up to his feet in certain spots where higher level of competition would either keep him there or get to his back or whatever. David Martinez is not really much of a grappler, though. He's a kickboxer who's very fast on his feet, very quick, throws a lot of kicks, keeps his range very well. So I think Rob Font's maybe going to have some troubles closing the distance early, but Rob Font's jab is one of the best in the game, and that's great for finding the range and finding the distance. I could see Martinez hitting him with some big leg kicks early, getting him off his game and keeping that range. But I think overall, Rob Font's going to be able to close that distance and probably start to get his game going. And Martinez just hasn't seen this level of competition before. I'm not saying he's completely out of it, but considering this is on short notice against a guy in Rob Font that I think still at 38 years of age is going to be levels above David Martinez, I think Font gets it done. I'm going to take Font for the early pick here. I think it's just a little bit too much too soon for David Martinez, but I don't think he's going to be completely out of it. I just think Rob Font's going to be able to edge it as the fight progresses. To the main event, we got a very, very fun fight here. Jean Silva comes in at minus 275, Diego Lopes 235. And right off the bat, that's crazy to see. Diego Lopes at plus 235. I don't want to say once again, but the last time he was a big underdog was against Movsar Evloev. And you look at that fight, it wasn't a blowout by Evloev by any means. It was a very competitive fight. So right off the bat, I'm like, wow, Diego Lopes is a plus 235 dog against a guy that doesn't have the UFC experience that Diego Lopes does. Diego Lopes just fought for a title, dropped the champion, or the now champion in Alexander Volkanovski in round 2. But this is a very different fight. Lord Jean Silva is 28 years of age. He trains with the Fighting Nerds, so he's getting great training. Very, very fast. And I think this guy is one of the best counter strikers that I've seen. I watched this guy's film, and I'm just amazed by the confidence, the flow, the unbotheredness of Jean Silva in the way that he strikes. And for a guy in Diego Lopes who can be a bit aggressive, I think that's probably going to be poor for Diego. But there are times where Diego, even against Volkanovski with the movement, was a little bit gun shy and he couldn't really get the range. And I could see a similar thing happening here in the striking to where, Lord Jean Silva is kind of baiting him to throw stuff and Diego's not really, giving him that opportunity to throw something and for Silva to counter it. And then, of course, you got to factor in the grappling. Like, Diego Lopes has been trying to improve his wrestling for a good amount of time. This guy just seems like he's always in the wrestling room with the wrestling shoes on, getting it in. And we already know his jiu-jitsu is nasty. So, if Diego Lopes can come in here and get a good wrestling game plan going, I don't think he's completely out of it. I think he might be able to take over the fight, but a good test for that, of course, for Jean Silva was the Bryce Mitchell fight. You know, how was your wrestling looking? Bryce Mitchell's probably going to test that. The difference between Bryce Mitchell and Diego Lopes is Lopes way bigger for the weight class, has much better striking than Bryce Mitchell, or at least more dangerous striking than Bryce Mitchell. I guess, he fought for a title as well. Diego Lopes might have more high-level experience than Bryce Mitchell as well, and better jiu-jitsu and more knockout power. So, there's a lot of differences in that matchup between Mitchell and Diego Lopes that you have to look at and kind of factor in. So, Silva passed the Bryce Mitchell test, but the Diego Lopes test is obviously a step above that. And now he's minus 275. I think Jean Silva is a legit talent, and I do think he probably passes this against Diego Lopes. But where the line stands, it's going to be tempting to play Diego Lopes as a plus 235 dog who probably has, the grappling upside, has some knockout power on the feet. But I think Lord Jean Silva is just way too good at range, way too sharp on the feet. He is very physical for the weight class as well, very big, very strong. And he showed a submission his last time out too. So, I'm going to take Jean Silva for the early pick here, but this is just an amazing fight, man. I love this fight. I love that they made the matchup, and I love that it's on Noche UFC because we get the two Brazilians fighting on Noche UFC. But, of course, Diego Lopes has the ties to Mexico. He's been training there for a while. But I appreciate y'all for watching. Like the video for me. Subscribe to the channel. Sorry I couldn't do this with a recap of Paris, but got to get it out to you guys because I'll be out of town this weekend. But appreciate y'all. Like the video. Subscribe. Till next time. Hey, Job Picks. We out.